right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Spaces live virtual event, The Art of Living Outdoors. My name is Natasha. I am the Marketing Manager and Virtual Events Coordinator here at Make It Better Media Group, and I will be helping to moderate today's event behind the scenes. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to reach out to me via the chat located on the right side of your screen. This will also be where you can submit your questions for the panel Q&A, so we look forward to hearing from you. Today, we are going to hear from Jesse Harrison, Principal of Harrison Design, Ben Lenhardt, Chairman Emeritus of the Garden Conservancy and author of Gardens of the North Shore of Chicago, and Heather Sandy Hebert, brand consultant and author of At Home in the Wine Country and The New Architecture of Wine. We are also joined by Liz Logan, Editor-in-Chief of Spaces, who will be moderating the panel discussion and Q&A portion of the event. We are so grateful to be joined by such powerful thought leaders. A big thank you as well to our sponsor, Harrison Design. Harrison Design specializes in high-end residential architecture, interior design, and landscape architecture for clients throughout the US and abroad. From traditional to modern, their body of work represents the full spectrum of scale and style. I'm now going to turn it over to Liz, who will introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Natasha, and thanks to all of our panelists for being with us today. Jesse Harrison will be our first speaker. He has served as the Business Development Director at Harrison Design since 2010 in the Los Angeles office. Before joining Harrison Design, he co-founded a company that brands, markets, and manages luxury properties. He also has directed a contemporary art gallery in Atlanta, is a founding member of UNICEF Next Gen Los Angeles, an active member of the Los Angeles Conservancy, Design Industries Foundation Fighting AIDS in Los Angeles, and the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. I will turn it over to you, Jesse.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good. Well, I think, so living outdoors, and I think, are we sharing some imagery here? Great. So as an architecture firm, that was where our firm got its start in designing high-end custom homes. Obviously, a beautiful home is what our clients come to us for, but any good architect, any good designer, any landscape architect knows that the line between indoors and outdoors bleeds together quite a bit, and it really bleeds together. I'm based on the West Coast, and in California, it really is a whole nother level of bleeding from inside to outside. And so there has to be a seamless design aesthetic that goes from the inside of a house to the exterior of a house to the landscape of the house. Obviously that's a singular thing when you're dealing with a freestanding home. I think we've done condominiums and some commercial projects where obviously it's important to adapt to the surroundings. But when you really are looking at high-end residential homes, especially in California, the outside is the inside. The outside is where you live, where you entertain, where you connect the interior design of the house to the design on the exterior of the house with not only with the colors and the palette that you use, but with the actual furniture that you use and the art and the fabrics you use, and everything really has to blend together, because all the homes we design in California, almost every home we've designed in California, whether it's Los Angeles or Santa Barbara or Montecito, the exterior of the house is absolutely part of the language of the interior. And so, for instance, here's a good example of this image that is showing on the screen. So this is a project that we did for our client in Malibu. This is actually a lower level basement space, and this is what's called a light well, which is a courtyard that you access from the basement level of a house that's open to the sky above. And so in this case, this was off of a lower level bar, and the light well really originally, we didn't design the original house. We came in and helped the client develop the interiors and dress up the exteriors and the outdoor living spaces. But this was really just a dead space. The idea here was we commissioned an extremely well-known graffiti and mural artist to do an art installation with seating so that when these doors are open, there's bistro lighting and there's planting. This feels like an extension of that indoor space that bleeds seamlessly to the outdoors. So this is a case where we were able to use furniture, art, plants, and make it really feel like a room outside of the house. And then maybe the next slide. And gathering spaces, obviously in a climate like California, where the weather can swing, in Los Angeles, it can swing as much as 30, 40 degrees, even in the summertime. So nighttime entertaining and dining and all those things is critical in Los Angeles, and I'm sure in most other places, but in California, it's year round. So we do a lot of these gathering spaces with fire pits and a place for people. In this particular project, this is the same Malibu project. That's a view of the ocean, and that's facing west, where you got a beautiful sunset. So, it's critical that we create spaces where people can move around their property and enjoy sunrise, sunset, enjoy the ocean, depending on the weather and time of day. So spaces like this, these chairs swivel so people can talk, people can enjoy the view, people can warm up at the fire. Next slide. Same property. So this is an outdoor dining and outdoor entertaining space. So this has a pizza oven, a grill, there's a burner, ice maker, refrigerators. I mean, this is essentially a complete outdoor kitchen where the family can entertain. Just around the corner that you can't see is an outdoor fireplace, an outdoor television, heaters. So it really is, in this particular property and most of the projects we do in Southern California, you can live your entire life essentially outdoors. You can entertain, you can watch TV, you can gather with your family. So and there's a real hunger now, even in not the highest end homes, to do these outdoor kitchens and complete outdoor living spaces. And next slide. This is in Montecito. This is a little bit of a different type of setting. Obviously, you can see this isn't an ocean view property. This is a property set in a beautiful grove of oak trees. But again, the idea of a complete outdoor dining space where people can gather outside. You'll see here there are draperies in this space. So if the sun or the wind are a little too intense or a little much, you can close this space off and feel even more like you're in a cozy inside space while still enjoying the outdoors. And the next slide. This is a bit more modern. So again, just an outdoor gathering space with television, fireplace. The furniture here is a bit more modern. We warmed it up with teak. So that's also another big consideration when we do outdoor spaces, is connecting the materials, but also it's a chance to do something a little different. So the exteriors of this house are a tad more warm and modern. There's so much stone and so much metal that the client wanted a touch of warmth. So that's why we chose warmer outdoor furniture to give it a little bit, it was a little less of a hard edge because the house is stone and stucco and a lot of paving. So softness of the plants and the wood was a chance to soften that up a little bit. And next. And then this is a bit more formal, obviously. This is an Italianate home we did in Bel Air here in California. There's this, in the center of the house, you see a big outdoor covered loggia with, again, the fireplace and TV and heat and all of those things. But then you can see off to the right near the swimming pool, some people want a bit of a destination on their property. So this is an outdoor semi-covered space that's a bit of a entertaining destination where people enjoy the pool. And then you still connect on the lower level of this house to pool, bath, and entertaining spaces in the lower level. So this is a bit more of a formal version of an outdoor living. And next slide. And then this house is a home that we did a major remodel to. It's in Beverly Park here in LA. This is an entirely new, this entire area was new. Infinity edge pool, hot tub, outdoor fire. This has, again, pizza oven, outdoor bar, motorized shades and trellises, or motorized fabric rather within trellises, but just a different aesthetic, and a lot of balconies off the back of the house, and places to gather, outdoor bar, fireplace. You see kind of the same element over and over, which is an entire living space on the exterior of the house, usually connected with doors that open completely. And I think we had one more. Yeah. And then I think this is the last slide that we had. This is a home we did in Beverly Hills. It was an extremely heavy Chinese house, and the client wanted us to strip it way back, but keep a few elements. So you see there's a keyhole design here. This was meant to connect on two sides, this outdoor living space. On one side, I think you can see is a tennis court. So this is a tennis pavilion, and it steps right down into the swimming pool. So this was a bit more formal and a bit more clean and modern, but more of a transitional outdoor space to enjoy the pool and the tennis court. So, and I think, was that the last slide? So that's just a little bit of a few different examples of some of the outdoor spaces we've done here in California.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next speaker is Ben Lenhardt. He is a passionate gardener, and over the past 30 years, he has become adept at working in different climates, in part because he lives part of the year in Charleston, South Carolina, and the other part of the year outside Chicago. He is also enthusiastic about historic preservation. He is currently a board member of multiple organizations, including the Chicago Botanic Garden, the Shedd Aquarium, the Peggy Noterbert Nature Museum in Chicago, Drayton Hall Preservation Trust, the Preservation Society of Charleston, and the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston. He is also Chairman Emeritus of the Garden Conservancy, which is a national nonprofit dedicated to preserving, sharing, and celebrating America's gardens. And he is the author of Gardens of the North Shore of Chicago, a book that came out in 2020 that gives a look into 25 private gardens on Chicago's North Shore. And he will be sharing images from that book today, and you can also see more of them at spacesmag.com. Ben, thank you so much for being here. I'll let you take over.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. And I just heard a thunder cloud, and so hopefully that won't interrupt us. But it's a pleasure to speak to you, whether you're in the morning or in the afternoon, depending upon which coast. And I thought I would just preface, before I show you some photos, gardening and living outside and spending time outside has become even more important as a result of COVID. And I think that trend will continue. Sales in nurseries are quite robust now. Even during COVID, people, as you know, not only worked on their homes, but they worked on their, whether it was a backyard or an estate garden or whatever, because gardens provide a sense of, particularly in difficult times, of solace, contemplation, and also for experimentation, as you will see. I'm going to start first with a picture of Scott Byron and his wife Maureen's garden in Glencoe, Illinois. And when they bought the house, Maureen said, I want a screened-in porch where we can entertain our friends, but also the family can spend lots of time. So Scott, being a devotee of Church, the great landscape architect, what he did is he created and surrounded this screened-in porch on 3 sides with gardens, with axes in 3 different directions. And here you can see is a bluestone small terrace with a contemporary fountain, and then surrounded by boxwoods. And then in the distance are other gardens. So really, it's green all around. Next, Natasha. Natasha, there. This is a home, a historic home in Lake Forest that the Harrises have. And it's a big property. You can see the green space in front, and then in the back, a prairie. And off to the right is a cutting garden, etc. But Charles Stick, the landscape architect in Charlottesville, Virginia, actually just put a very large boxwood parterre right down on the large bluestone terrace. So he effectively brought the garden into this space, interrupted it, and it looks absolutely fabulous. Next. Not everybody has 45 acres, but Donna LaPietra and Bill Curtis, the announcer and TV producer, etc. Bill is from Kansas, and so he's always had a love affair with prairies. So this is a picture of their prairie in early August with blazing star, and the prairie is about 35 acres. But what's interesting is they built a mound similar to an Indian mound here in the Midwest with 3 different levels for viewing. So you can go up there, have a cocktail or whatever, or lunch or dinner, and at different levels, and overlook the prairie. So a very innovative way of using an outdoor space. Just get yourself an Indian mound. Next. This is a much more traditional and classic house, but also the garden. Scott Byron designed this. There are many terraces opening off of this house. And so they look on this green carpet that Scott has encircled with perennial beds with little hints occasionally of annuals. Next. Deborah Nevins, the landscape architect, did this amazing boxwood amphitheater. And what's interesting is this is the home of Shirley and Pat Ryan. And they have a swimming pool as you on the bottom, basically the basement, which is that the terrace area, and you can see the French doors leading to it. And so they wanted garden actually as you're swimming in the swimming pool to look out, and you can see this boxwood amphitheater that's got crab apples on the ridges. It's a wonderful space. Next. This is an allée, a plane tree allée that Jack Crow actually designed. Jack died recently, and Peggy, his wife, still lives there. And this is a space that they use for entertaining, particularly for, you can have about 80 people in this allée. And once we were there, and I remember Jack is very involved with the Lyric Opera here in Chicago. And so we had opera singers come along on the outsides, and it was just fantastic. And it's lighted, of course, with uplighting. So it's a magical spot, both at day as well as night. This is a garden that Craig Bergman designed. He designed the pergola, which is actually inspired by the great Dixter Garden in England. But what's unusual about this, and when we photographed it, because the book, of course, is about gardens, but if to the right is a swimming pool, and there's a matching descending border on either side. So as Donna McKay and her husband Terry, whose wonderful house and garden this is, as she says, when the grandchildren come, they actually almost swim among flowers. Next. This is our house here in Winnetka, and this is a garden that I've been working on for over 40 years now. And I would make that point to everybody that gardens do not happen overnight. In contrast to interior decoration, which after considerable time, the project, if you will, is more or less completed, although certainly people can add things over the time. But for gardens, nature takes its time. And so what I did is I started up towards the house, and you can see the screen porch, and there are terraced borders. And then as you got down into the ravine spaces, which was the last garden that I created now some almost 10 years ago. But it's a wonderful spot to spend a summer afternoon as well as evening on the porch and enjoy and be surrounded by nature. The next. And I think this is the last. This is an example of, again, a very large property, Crabtree Farm. The late John Bryan and his wife Neville, they wanted a summer house, as they called it, for their children and grandchildren to come and visit. Their house is on the lake, which is way in the distance. But they hired Peter Wertz, who is the son of Jacques Wertz, the very famous Belgian designer, particularly of hedges. And so here he's taken very asymmetrical, sharp hedges, hornbeam hedges, and surrounded the pool area and parts of the house. But it blends almost seamlessly with the beautiful pastures that you see in the distance. So again, a wonderful way to combine nature with the house and make really a sense of place to the entire property. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing those beautiful photos and that information with us. It was fascinating. Next up, we have Heather Sandy Hebert. Heather has spent years engaged in writing, design, and wine, while also serving as a marketing director for an international architecture firm up until 2017. For over 25 years in that position, she created a strong brand identity for the company. She wrote about the firm's projects and helped clients formulate brand concepts for their projects. Now, Heather works with clients specializing in design, winery, and hospitality to help them find the best way to share their stories. She wrote a book entitled The New Architecture of Wine. That book came out in 2019. And she has a second book coming out on August 24th titled At Home in the Wine Country. And she'll be sharing photos from that book with us today. And you can also see more of them at spacesmag.com. Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is my first time doing something like this, so I'm a little nervous, so excuse me. As Liz mentioned, my background combines pretty deep immersion in hospitality design. And then when I went out on my own to write my first book on wineries, that was really a step toward a more personal type of architecture. And then this second book is a very personal type of architecture, obviously, at home in the wine country. So I've spent the last 4 years very immersed in living in the wine country in particular. I was born and raised in Northern California, so the landscape is extremely familiar to me. But this was a chance to really pull it all together. So my experience kind of dovetails between years in hospitality design, the writing and researching of the books, and getting to know the architects and landscape architects and interior designers that design these wonderful spaces in the wine country. And then at the same time, I took a backhoe to my backyard and redid my entire backyard. So I had a very personal experience of creating a much smaller space than some of the spaces you might see in our this book, which I co-wrote with Chase Reynolds Ewald, who's a tremendous writing partner and tremendously talented person. And as you can see, we put a garden on the cover. It's about architecture, but we put a garden on the cover because the essence of living in the wine country really is living outside, and living indoors and outside. And wine country in particular is a very unique blend of, the wild, in the surrounding mountains and woodlands, and the cultivated in the vineyards, and then the planned in the gardens, and then the exteriors and the interiors. So there's, a bunch of levels here. And this image in particular, this is a garden designed by Let's Go and Associates, a tremendously talented landscape design firm, for a house designed by Faolong architects. And you can see here that you can't see it, but it is really one of the best examples I can find of the lines in the concrete lining up with the beautiful gardens, which line up with the vineyard rows, which is a borrowed view, and then leading out to some small buildings in the outstanding areas, to the mountains in the distance. And it really sort of encapsulates what it's like to live, in the wine country. And the other thing that's very particular about the wine country, and what I've chosen to immerse myself in the last couple of years, is it's definitely a product of the topography, the landscape, and the weather. We're so fortunate, but it's also a state of mind. Hospitality is really baked in, so that translates from the boutique hotel experience to the winery hospitality experience to the home experience. So that is really, very much, it's culture. It's about the culture. So next slide. This is an amazing home in Healdsburg, designed by Sutro Architects, with landscape by Artera and interior design by Adini Design Group in San Francisco. And I picked this slide. Okay, just a note, it was almost impossible to pick images for this presentation because I could have taken any image in the book and put it in here and would have had something to say about it. But this in particular, this home, as you can see, if you look through, it is completely open on two sides to the views. And to the right of your screen, it opens to the valley views of the Sonoma Valley. And facing us, it opens to a lovely, very casual pool area. And the things that really strike me that I think are sort of informative with this project is, it's not huge. This is not a huge house. It's not a huge site. But they've placed, the living room, the kitchen, which is to your left looking through there. If you can see the window sort of opens up and there's a pass through, and then everything else is open. And it's very casual and casual, convenient, and very heavily used. It's not a precious environment. They're picnic tables, lovely picnic tables, but they're picnic tables. And they are shaded by the shed roof. And then that warmth of that wood is carried into the home throughout the kitchen, on the interior, the roof on the interior. I'm not sure if you can see that, pick that out. But it is an absolutely integral experience and easy to use. I think that's something that we can all take with us. Is just it's the juxtaposition is sort of not only seamless, but casual and easy and usable and friendly and welcoming. So the next slide. This is very different. This is larger, more formal. This is the same house as what you saw on the cover, landscape by Let's Go Landscape Architects, and the house is designed by Fao Long, Melanie Turner at Fao Long. She also did the interiors. And I highlighted this for a couple of reasons. First is the amazing landscape that is all in one hue here, because it's a certain season. But you know, in the wine country, you have a tremendous show of seasons. It's sort of like the fall colors on the East Coast. Well, wine country's got it because it's the vineyards. But California in general is fairly temperate. That's why we can live outside so much. But the way that they design these gardens is that they are a wonderful show of color that changes with the season. So it's a really strong signal of you know, the seasonality of the place, because the agriculture, which is so much a part of this place, takes part following the seasons. And another thing that I love, just a little, I sent inset a little picture in the cover. It's my favorite spot in the whole house, and this is in the little pool house to the right. And it's a window seat, and there's two of them, and that opens up. That is not a window, that is an open space. So you're literally inside and outside at the same time. And it's also a very carefully framed view. If you notice, this house is not, with the exception of the central area, the views are carefully framed. So when you're inside, it's almost like the landscape is artwork. And so it's living outside, but then it's also bringing the outside in a way that's almost like art. Next. This is amazing. This is designed by William Duff and Associates, WDA, and it's in the Napa Valley. And this is a small barn that was reclaimed, and then with interior structure set within it that's entirely mirrored, or it's actually that one-way mirror. So it's a mirror from this side. When you're on, the kitchen's to one side and the workout room's on the other. It's a window so you can see in. They called it Big Ranch Barn because it's where it's located. In the book, we call it Inside Outside Barn, because literally you're inside, but you're outside at the same time. Not only because of the large opening at the end, but the reflection throughout. It's a singular experience that just is kind of hard to describe. But that indoor outdoor at the same time is really arresting and super effective, and the use of a historic barn, and it's just all things that I think we can take away, and you know, tricks isn't the right word, but strategies to bring the outside in. Next. This is called the Black Box House. I think George calls it Black House. We called it the Black Box House. This is designed by George Bevan, with landscape by Let's Go and Let's Go in Healdsburg. And this house is designed, these are guest houses. So this is really, I was drawn to this house for the book because it takes a very hospitality-oriented approach to moving through the house. It's a very modern house, as you can see, set in a woodland landscape. These are two guest rooms that are actually separate structures that open to the pool, which you can't see. I would literally be standing in the pool. I don't know quite how they got this photo. So you're inside and outside at the same time. But what was interesting about this, for anybody that's building a new home, is you walk through the landscape to get to these guest bedrooms. They're not accessible from the inside, which is sort of a very boutique hospitality approach. And the other thing that I thought was interesting in the indoor-outdoor living is they're all white on the inside. They're very comforting and welcoming. The outside is painted black. And when I asked George Bevan why he did that, he said, because the space between the landscape in the woodland is dark, it's shadow. So it goes away a lot more than you would think a black box house would. And it's true, it does. Next. This is sort of a deconstructed house at a whole nother level. This is by Andrew Mann, and it is set within a garden. It's in Sonoma, and it's set within gardens by Krista Monet, and it's at a distance from the house, and it's set in the woods, and it really is a separate kitchen, and you are really eating in the garden. This is a mixture of obviously floral design, but edible gardens. And it really sort of takes that deconstructing the home to another level, where it's, you don't know whether you're in the house or in the landscape or both. Next. This is another George Bevan, Mike, did I say Let's Go and Let's Go before? Lucas and Lucas, sorry. Mike Lucas collaboration. This, I picked these images because this is a house, this is a pool house, a very modern pool house set in a meadow. And it's a little shard of a building that kind of peaks above this very tall meadow that Mike Lucas designed, set at quite a distance from the main house. And the point of this slide was that the whole point of it was to create a journey from the main house through the meadow to this pool house. And you don't have to have a big property. I think the main takeaway from this is you don't have to have a big property to create a journey. It's just more about what Mike Lucas calls moments in the landscape. And you can see the 2 Adirondack chairs there. I have a much smaller yard than this, and I did it. It's a long, narrow yard. And I put primary seating areas at 2 ends. So you have to traverse the yard to get from one end to the other, and they're oriented toward each other. And so it created a sense of journey. And so I sort of mimicked Mike's approach in a very much smaller space. So it definitely can be done. Next. And I think this is the last slide. This is, we call this Nestled in Nature in the book. And this is a house by Michael Guthrie and company with landscape by another husband-wife landscape architecture team. They're based in downtown Sonoma, Dave and Nancy Roach. And this is another, kind of like what I did for the deconstructing the house. I did the same thing here. This is an even more sort of attenuated example of a journey through the landscape to a spot or a moment for living outdoors. And so Dave and Nancy Roach surrounded this house with journeys, and this is just one of them. And you go through these natural outcroppings, and they have this lovely meadow of natural grasses. And then you end up at the fire pit that you see down at the left, which was, handcrafted of Corten steel. And it is an amazing moment. And when you're sitting there, you overlook the Sonoma Valley. This is up in the hills up behind downtown Sonoma. And you just don't get more integrated into the landscape than this. And I chose it as the last slide because it sort of epitomizes for me that juxtaposition, particularly where my experience lies in Northern California in the wine country, between the wild, the cultivated, and the carefully designed, and how they blend together, and how they each inform each other. And that really is sort of the essence of living outside in the wine country, for me anyway. And that's it.
Heather, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I just have 1 or 2 questions for our panelists before we move into a Q&A. So for the people who are on right now, please share your questions in the Q&A section for our panelists, and we can get to them in just a couple of minutes. As I said, you can see more photographs from Ben's book and Heather's book on spacesmag.com. But if you are interested in design and interested in gardening and indoor-outdoor living, you should definitely pick up those 2 books, because the photography is incredible and it just offers so much inspiration for everyone. All of our panelists talked a little bit about, or more than a little bit about, COVID and how it has changed the way that we live outdoors and made that so much more important for us. I did just want to share a few tidbits that I found online. One study said that gardening was the 2nd most popular lockdown activity people plan to do, after watching TV was number 1. And then the 3rd, watching TV, then gardening. Then the 3rd and 4th were cooking and reading, and the 5th was exercising. So gardening was ranking above cooking, reading, and exercising. Some of the things that there were shortages of during COVID, our COVID year last year, were vegetable seeds, trampolines, hammocks, and swimming pools. So there were record numbers, record sales at nurseries, and tons of people were creating vegetable gardens for the first time. Another stat that I found was that 80% of people in 2020, 80% of those with outdoor space made upgrades, and that included planting trees, 40%, and adding a garden, 30%. And a quote that I loved that I found from a landscape architect, Janice Parker, she says, "COVID changed people's perception of the outdoors. No matter how beautiful we did seating areas and outdoor areas before, the minute it rained or was too sunny or there were too many bugs or the temperature changed, people just went inside," she says. If people wanted to see friends, when COVID came along, if people wanted to see friends, they had to be outside. So we built pavilions and heated them. We built fire features, heated furniture, heated mats underneath rugs on the terrace. People wanted to be outside. I think it stuck. I think people spent enough time outside to realize how beautiful it is. So I wanted to ask our panelists, Heather, you talked a little bit about working on your own space last year. How did COVID, what upgrades did you make to your outdoor living spaces? And what would you love to do going forward? What would your dream space look like?
Well, that's a pretty good question. I created my dream space. So there's nothing I didn't do. We literally took a backhoe to our backyard and there was nothing left, not one thing. And I really did we did it, actually a couple of years ago. We were done right before COVID hit, actually. And it was life-changing. So we were very used to entertaining outside. We're on a corner lot, so we have a long, narrow, so we have a shallow yard, but very long, and goes from circular fire pit. I found that circles are so important because it just so happened that our Adirondack chairs were exactly 6 feet apart around our fire pit, to outdoor dining, to pool and spa, to sofa at the far end. So you had to, look at and fire pits at both ends of the yard. And it really changed our life. And I think I agree with you. One thing that comes up in every conversation I have, we entertain outside all the time. We started that pre-COVID. It became more so. We felt like we were able to be more social during COVID because we had this lovely outdoor area that was heated. The fire pit's quite large, so it throws off a lot of heat. And the other thing is people not wanting the outdoor dining, on the parking lots and parking spaces to go away. So I think we have learned, and we sat outside in the drizzle around the warmth and had our lovely blankets that we gathered, and we did that kind of thing. So so I guess my answer is I created my dream house, dream garden, A, and B. I hope, and I don't think it's going to change. I think our already embedded sense of entertaining and living outdoors in California anyway is just going to expand. And I'm sure it expanded other places, even without quite as long of a outdoor season as we have here.
And Ben and Jesse, do you want to tell us a little bit about your outdoor spaces? Anything you want to share?
Well, we didn't do anything new relative to our places, but the thing I would just, and it's not the negative, well, it is a negative, but what I found is I missed terribly visiting other gardens. And as you can imagine, being a gardener, but also being involved with the Garden Conservancy, we have always had open days where we opened the gardens throughout the country. And I got most of my ideas for our garden from visiting other gardens. And as Frank Cabot, who founded the Garden Conservancy, said, copying is the highest form of flattery. So I missed that because I didn't go. haven't been yet to a garden tour, but that is happening. So I would say that was something that I missed, but we didn't actually do anything different to our actual gardens.
Jesse, is there anything you want to say about your own outdoor living?
No, I just, my in-laws had done a huge remodel to their outside of their home before COVID, and it ended up being sort of this saving grace for our entire family because they had built an outdoor kitchen, an outdoor living space, and a new pool and fire and all those things. And so we were able to go have an outdoor Thanksgiving and outdoor holidays. And so we were able to have some kind of normalcy during COVID. So I think now we're planning to do a big overhaul to our own yard and build a new pool and gardens and really, do it up. We're in the city, so it's a little harder, but it inspired me long term, I think, to build more true outdoor living spaces of our own. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a question that came in from the audience. How do you think opening glass walls, like the Nana wall, which Heather knows is very common in wine country and in Northern California, how do those improve the indoor-outdoor experience? Do you find that it's a feature homeowners are requesting more in their designs?
Yes, absolutely.
I would agree. It's actually, it's not even a request. It's sort of just an assumed, you assume that at least in one major space in the house that you're going to have an element like that. It's usually like the kitchen family space where you have at least, in any house, you pick a few places where you want to spend your money. And usually it's the kitchen, the master suite, or two big ones, outdoor living. But yeah, those door spaces, the big decision is just how big you want to make them, because the price goes up exponentially the larger they get. What material you want to use? Are they metal? Are they wood? Do they pocket? Do they completely hide in the walls? And, if you really want to get fancy in some of our larger projects, often they're motorized. So talk about a fun toy. You just hit a button and the doors completely vanish into the walls automatically.
That's a fun toy. They really are a game changer because it is an absolute seamless transition. And it really makes, literally the wall is gone. And you kind of can't duplicate that in any other way. And
the best way to do it, honestly, and we're doing another project in Malibu right now with a pool cabana with all the glass will open. The material inside goes seamlessly into the interior with just a tiny reveal where the door track goes. Yep. That's probably the nicest way you can do it, where when it's open, it literally looks as though the indoor material flows straight to the exterior and you almost can't even tell when they're open where the separation was.
Now, Jesse, let me ask you, because I know your firm does projects nationally and even internationally. Can you do a nano wall like that in Chicago, where I live?
You can, absolutely. Listen, technology has improved the performance of windows and glass so drastically in the last, particularly the last few decades, and building codes have really become more stringent in most places to save energy and to, to be more green and more efficient. So absolutely, it's really just about what type of glass you're choosing, what type of system you're using. Anytime you select a door system with, any place that there's a gap or an opening, it's all about, protection from the exterior, right? Or losing heat or air conditioning in the winter or summer. So you can, but it is going to be, you are probably you get more heat in the summer and you're going to lose heat in the winter. But the technology is so amazing now that with the way they produce doors and windows and glass, that you can do it essentially anywhere. The big thing in a cold climate is the more glass you have, it's really just more about what do you want to look at most of the year. You know, when you live in California and it's January and you have everything in bloom and it's sunny and blue skies and 75 degrees, that's more pleasurable to look at from inside your house. When it's 4 degrees and dreary and dark out at 3 in the afternoon and everything is, you know, has lost its leaves and it's a bit gray, is it as fun to look at? You know, I think it's less of a symptom of can you do it? It's more of what's the experience you want in the months when it's not so pretty.
Good point.
That is very good advice. Although I will say that we got tons of snow this past winter in Chicago, and the light that came off, like reflecting off the snow into the windows, was gorgeous. So
you're right. It's all perspective, right? If you personally, I need to see greenery and sunshine, but lots of people who live in the Northeast and the Midwest see all the beauty in the winter landscape, which can be just as incredible. So as long as you enjoy that, then absolutely you should live in a glass box if you can.
Awesome. Thank you. And actually, that just leads me naturally into another question I want to ask, which is, because you mentioned heating and cooling, when you're designing your outdoor spaces, how can we make decisions that are going to be responsible when it comes to thinking about climate change and the impact that we're going to have? What have you seen people doing in terms of making smart decisions in that way?
I think,
go ahead.
Well, Ben can probably speak more to the actual garden itself, right? So obviously it depends on where you live. We live in a state that's riddled with drought. And so we're forced to make smart decisions with water consumption. And to plant in a way that, we get no rain for months and then we get a lot of rain all in a rainy season, and then we get mudslides. And so there's a multi-layer to planting in a way that doesn't consume water, and then planting in a way that stabilizes the natural landscape. Other than that, it's, energy consumption. You can use solar power to heat things like water features, or rather not water features, but your spa, your pool. You can use solar energy. In other climates, I think you can use geothermal and other technology that we don't necessarily use so much in Southern California. And then in terms of building, you can just use repurposed and reclaimed building materials, and try to use sustainable type materials.
And I think I've found in interviewing all the architects for these projects, that a couple of things. Siting is incredibly important, right? So they're using passive heating and cooling is incredibly important, and materials that are fire resistant are also incredibly important. And defensible spaces, and thinking about hardscape versus softscape. And there's one project in our book that I didn't show a picture of, but it is a very, very contemporary structure nestled into an outcropping, and part of it is covered in a Corten steel, part of it's wood, but it's got a rock outcropping protecting one side, and a lap pool. Literally, if you step out the door from the master bedroom, your foot's in the pool along one side. And so they've created this very sort of natural defensible space, and a lot of the materials that they used are fire resistant. And those kinds of decisions are really interesting design decisions. It's not all limitations. They're challenges, and they definitely are being met.
Liz, I would comment a little bit on your question and move it towards the ecology. What people are doing these days is, of course, being very careful with the use of chemicals. 15 years ago when I was gardening, you sprayed anything, and it did the trick, but nobody paid much attention to what it might be doing to the atmosphere or the rest. And so that has now also flowed into native plants. people are wanting to plant plants that like the area that they're in. And so you're seeing more and more of that. And of course, one of the factors, the days of these great estate gardens, where people had, in some cases here on the North Shore of Chicago, they had 50 gardeners to take care of these highly manicured, very intricate gardens. But no one has 50 gardeners today. And so it's changed, what you plant, the design, and then how you take care of it.
I just wanted to add, I saw today that the Royal Horticultural Society in the UK just launched a study. They're going to study what plants are best for the environment. And Ben would know a lot about that because they do a lot of that work at the Chicago Botanic Garden, which of course you're on the board of. So everyone's kind of thinking in that mode, which is wonderful.
I'll vote for the oak tree.
Oh, okay.
Ben actually raised an excellent point, which is people have become so much more aware of the chemicals and the things that they put into the environment, and which dovetails into our COVID conversation and the use of chemicals, which is the food that you eat and where does it come from. And, several years ago, the whole farm to table movement became so relevant, and everyone started really thinking about where their food came from. And so during COVID, people learned how to grow, to some degree, a lot of their own food. And so I think people now are a lot more aware. And I think a lot of these formats or forums like your publication and HGTV and all these online resources, people now have so much information, and they really understand the impact of what they put in their garden, how they treat it, how it impacts everything around them, how it impacts their own family, their pets, their kids, their family members. And then now that people have learned to grow their own food, I think that really clicks for them that what they put in the ground and their own surroundings can literally directly impact their own health.
I would concur very much, Jesse, and I think Heather as well. California has led the way in the nation with regards to edible gardens. You've been doing that for some time, but people, particularly on the East Coast and the Midwest as well, but that has not really been a big thing. It's been more into, historically I'm talking, into flower gardening. And I think that is really changing. And COVID, of course, contributed to that. But also, young families find that vegetable gardening is a wonderful teaching tool and a way also to, with their children, to put things in the ground and watch them grow, and then watch the tomatoes or what the pumpkins
Absolutely.
or the watermelons and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a wonderful phenomena, but kudos to California because of your wonderful weather. You've kind of led the way, and we're catching on.
Well, and if you really want to go, and we won't go off into the weeds on this, no pun intended, but the biggest contributor to climate change is people eating beef and eating meat, right? Cows. And so I think a lot of people have started
Eating less.
Learning a lot about eating a plant-based diet and growing their own food. So maybe there's some hope that with people learning to grow their own food, embracing eating more foods that come out of the ground, maybe that will start to shift people's perception of what they can eat and bigger picture ways that they can maybe impact some of these climate issues.
Mm-hmm. And there's been the edible garden movement, or back to the edible garden movement, is really changed in that it's integrated into the whole garden. And then where you're eating, a couple of the homes in my next book, you're eating in the garden, not the flower garden. You're eating in the kitchen garden, and it's right there. And so the hospitality experience is completely integrated with, the agricultural experience, which is then, that juxtaposition again between that, and then you're looking at the vineyard experience, and then you're looking at the oak trees and the, the oak woodland experience, which is so important, to the health of our ecosystem. So it's that integrating it into everyday life, just like integrating living outside into everyday life, integrating the eating, the growing of the food with the eating and the entertainment, and it's all one thing. You know what I mean? And that definitely is sort of a California forward thing, partially because we have the agricultural here. So.
And of course, this is such a timely topic, living outdoors, because I think that spending so much time outdoors has made us appreciate nature so much more and made us more attuned and wanting to be more protective of our environment.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I see a couple of questions on the side. Should we answer them, or do you choose them, or how does that work?
No, I only see one question in the Q&A. Natasha, can you help?
I would love to help. Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions, Liz. I've been posting them. Well, let's see. Let's start with under the stage chat. I see a question from Shannon Hicks. And she says, beautiful photos and properties, everyone. I'm wondering if you can talk about fireplace versus fire pits, how to decide which one to install.
Oh, I can talk about that because I debated on that myself. And then just about every house in the book has one or the other. I think the main essence is, asking yourself which experience do you want? They're both community, they're both in a circle, they're both, enveloping environment, but are you wanting to look out at a view, or are you wanting to look inward or toward a spot? Because with a fireplace, you're looking at it. With a fire pit, you're looking over it, out beyond to something else, whether it's more people in a circle, whether it's, in my case, sitting at one end of a long, narrow yard and looking all the way to the other end, whether it's that semicircular fire pit at the home above Sonoma, where they're looking out across the entire Sonoma Valley. So I think it just depends on whether it's an integrated environment, or it's a covered environment, or a opening up of a view, and probably a borrowed view. Borrowed views are a big thing. And, because you've got your views, and then you've got, the views surrounding you, especially in the wine country. You've got your garden, and then you've got all the vineyards maybe that you're set, or you've got the oak woodlands, and that's your borrowed view that you might not necessarily own, but it's all around you. So it really depends on if you're inward and outward. And that sort of answers the question by the next woman who said, how do you seize that forest season in colder climates? Sort of the same way that probably there's a house in Calistoga that's in the book that it gets really hot there. But how they seize the hottest season is, to protect almost a room with no fourth wall, where that fireplace, and it's very cozy. And in the case of California, shaded, but perhaps in the case of Chicago, protected from the chillier weather or the rain or whatever. You're still outside, but it's cozy. There's a fireplace. There's indoor-outdoor sofas, with the perennials, fabrics, or whatever that you circle around. So it's kind of the same solution for two different extremes, I think. Yeah, that too.
It's personal preference, honestly. There really is no wrong. I think if you have a covered space, a fireplace works a little better.
Totally.
It's really just what you like. Fireplace is more aesthetically pleasing in a sense that you can have a hearth and you can have a mantle, and you can, if you wanted to, you could integrate a television above it or have sconces and things around it. A fire pit's a bit more modern. It's usually better outside, more of an uncovered space.
Right.
But the beauty of a fire pit is you can sit all the way around a fire pit and see people across it, which is a plus. But most places in California, that's not really the main heat source. It's really more for the experience. Usually there are other types of heaters and integrated heating in the ceiling, or those portable heaters. So it's really just picking what you like, I think, and what aesthetic you're going for.
Let's try and answer a few more questions. I think we have about maybe 10 minutes if you guys want to hang in there for a little bit, because I want to make sure we get to a few more. And I see a question from Scott Joyner, and he's asking about pergolas or wind sunscreens. Ben, do you have any experience with those?
Excuse me, you said what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I cut out. Someone was asking about pergolas or wind sunscreens, and if any of you have experience with that, might be able to touch on that.
Well, in terms of a pergola, what John Bryan and Neville Bryan did is very clever. They have a covered pergola that what they have done is they took plane trees and then they effectively bent them and they across the top, and then they have at the end, John Bryan was the lead person for raising about almost $300 million for the private sector for Millennium Park. And the bean, as you know, he was given a piece of the bean of the covering, the metallic covering at the end. So it's a wonderful pergola that they can use. It's right off of that pool area that I showed the picture with all of the asymmetrical hedges. So you can do very inventive things with pergolas, beyond just the usual, let's call it wooden pergola, something, add greenery to it. And it makes it even, in my opinion, even better.
I think motorized, what you see a lot in California, northern and southern, particularly in homes, but in a lot of restaurants and nicer hotels, you'll see a structure of some kind that's a permanent structure, and then you'll see some type of a fabric that's integrated into it that's either motorized or you can operate it by hand, so that you have the option of opening and closing. And the beauty of fabric versus a hard lid is fabric diffuses the light through, and you still have lightness rather than it turning into a dark sort of tunnel with a hard roof. Wind is tricky. You really want to, if you're going to build something, you'd be better served to really understand where the wind comes from before you build something. Putting a wind screen up after the fact is very hard to do. And something temporary is not usually terribly effective, and they're not usually very attractive. So it's probably a smart idea if you're going to build something and you have a windy spot, you really want to understand where the wind's coming from before you build it. Because we've yet to find some type of a wind screen that's really effective and that looks good.
Great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us, and I'm going to hand it back to Natasha.
All right, thanks, Liz, and thank you so much to our panelists, Jesse, Ben, Heather. It's wonderful to hear you all talk. And for any of the questions that we didn't get to, I'm going to take note of them, and we're going to do our best to ask the panelists outside of the event so we can put that in our article and make sure that those questions get answered. So keep an eye out for that. Let's see, other housekeeping. If you haven't done so already, check out the expo booths. There's a lot of unique products on there and also some resources to purchase Ben and Heather's books. And we would love to stay connected with you, so please subscribe to our Better Letter and follow us on our social media accounts. Like I said before, I'm going to be sending out a recording of this event probably within the next 24 hours. Then I'll also have all the resources you need to stay connected with us. And if you are watching this as a recording on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. We upload new content regularly. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Thank you.